The vault door is already closed when you arrive. No smoke, no assembly line, no cargo ships waiting at the docks. Just a quiet building in Zurich with thick walls, polished stone, and a brass plate by the door. Inside it's more money than the GDP of most countries on Earth, and almost none of it was made here. That's the uncomfortable part. Switzerland is one of the richest places in human history, yet it doesn't dominate manufacturing, doesn't export oil, doesn't have Silicon Valley, and didn't build an empire the traditional way. No sprawling colonies, no natural resources to speak of, no mass production miracle, and still it won. Understanding how Switzerland got rich without making much of anything matters right now because the global economy is quietly shifting in the same direction. Less about producing stuff, more about controlling flows. Capital, risk, trust, rules. Switzerland didn't just adapt to that world early. It helped invent it. To see how, you have to stop thinking about wealth as things you can touch and start thinking about it as things you can hide. The story usually starts with mountains, neutrality, snow, isolation, a small stubborn country that stayed out of wars while everyone else burned. That part is true, but it's not the reason Switzerland is rich. Plenty of neutral places stayed poor, plenty of mountainous countries never became financial superpowers. The real story starts with fear. In the 1600s and 1700s, Europe was a violent mess. Wars were constant, borders moved, kings borrowed heavily and defaulted casually. If you were rich, your biggest risk wasn't a bad investment, it was your own government. So wealthy families started asking a simple question: where can I put my money so no one can touch it? Switzerland didn't answer with armies or empires. It answered with paperwork, cantonal autonomy, weak central authority, courts that enforced contracts even against powerful people. A political culture obsessed with stability, predictability, and not rocking the boat. It wasn't flashy, but it was rare. By the early 1800s, Swiss private banks were quietly positioning themselves not as places to grow money fast, but as places where money could survive anything. Revolutions, coups, regime changes, wars, especially wars. The uncomfortable truth is that Switzerland's biggest economic accelerant wasn't peace. It was everyone else's chaos. During World War I, money fled collapsing empires and landed in Swiss accounts. During World War II, it happened again, on an even larger scale: assets from occupied countries, gold from central banks, private fortunes trying to disappear. Switzerland stayed neutral, officially impartial, commercially open, and very, very discreet. Bank secrecy laws weren't an accident or a quirky cultural trait. They were the product. In 1934, Switzerland passed one of the strictest bank secrecy laws in the world. Revealing client information became a criminal offense, not a civil violation, prison time. Think about what that signaled. If you were wealthy, powerful, or nervous, Switzerland wasn't just safe. It was silent. The country became less like a place and more like a financial bunker, and bunkers charge rent. Here's where the myth breaks: Switzerland didn't get rich by hiding piles of cash under mattresses. It got rich by becoming the middleman for almost everything valuable that didn't want attention: money, gold, commodities, insurance, risk, arbitration, accounting, intellectual property. If something needed to move quietly between countries, Switzerland offered the rails. Take commodities. Most people assume oil traders live in Houston or Dubai. In reality, many of the world's largest commodity trading firms are based in Geneva, Zug, or Lugano. These companies don't drill oil, they don't mine copper, they don't grow grain, they buy, they sell, they insure, they finance, they arbitrage. A barrel of oil might never touch Swiss soil, but the profit often does. Same with gold. More than half of the world's gold passes through Switzerland at some point. Not because Switzerland mines gold, it doesn't, but because Swiss refineries, logistics firms, and banks specialize in turning messy physical assets into clean, tradable financial ones. That transformation is where the margin lives. Now zoom out. By the late 20th century, Switzerland had built an economy optimized not for production, but for custody, holding things, managing things, structuring things, private banking fees, asset management fees, insurance premiums, trading spreads, legal services, tax optimization. None of these look impressive in isolation. Together, they compound into something enormous. Here's the math most people miss: if you manufacture a car, you earn a one-time profit. If you manage the money of the person who buys the car, you earn a small percentage every year, forever. Switzerland chose the second model, and it did it with religious discipline. The country deliberately avoided mass-scale industry that could threaten political stability or labor harmony. Wages stayed high, unions were integrated, not crushed. Immigration was tightly managed. Inflation was treated like a moral failure. The goal wasn't growth at all costs. It was trust at all costs. Trust that contracts would be honored. Trust that property rights were sacred. Trust that rules wouldn't change overnight. Trust that the system would still be standing tomorrow. That trust became a product other countries couldn't easily copy. Because here's the irony: you can't just declare yourself trustworthy, you have to earn it slowly. Over centuries, often by being boring, and Switzerland is aggressively boring. That's not an insult, it's a strategy. Now comes the uncomfortable part: not all money that flows towards silence is clean. For decades, Swiss banks accepted funds they didn't ask too many questions about: dictators, tax evaders, criminal networks, assets looted from colonies or seized during wars. Some of this was legal, some of it wasn't. Much of it lived in a gray zone protected by secrecy and plausible deniability. Switzerland wasn't unique in this, but it was exceptionally good at it, and exceptionally profitable. By the 1990s, pressure began to mount. The US and EU demanded transparency. Holocaust-era asset claims exposed moral failures, banking secrecy cracked, automatic information exchange slowly replaced silence. Many predicted Switzerland's decline. It didn't happen, because secrecy was never the core product. Stability was. Swiss banks lost some dirty money and replaced it with institutional capital. Pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, corporate treasury operations, family offices. The business shifted from hiding assets to structuring them, from secrecy to sophistication, from silence to compliance theater. The margins shrank slightly. The scale didn't, and Switzerland kept doing what it always did best: sitting at the center of flows without drawing attention. There's a quiet absurdity here. Switzerland produces relatively little compared to its wealth, yet it consumes some of the highest living standards on earth. Pristine infrastructure, universal healthcare, elite education, political calm. The value is extracted elsewhere, skimmed during transit, and deposited at home. This model works as long as the world remains fragmented, uncertain, and legally complex, which raises the stakes. What happens if trust decentralizes? If blockchain actually reduces intermediaries? If geopolitical blocks harden and capital stops flowing freely? If neutrality becomes impossible in a polarized world? Switzerland's entire economic model depends on being everyone's second choice. Not the loudest, not the most powerful, not the most innovative, just the safest place to park things when you don't know what comes next. That's a fragile position masquerading as strength, and yet it's endured longer than most empires. So here's the question to sit with: in a world where fewer things are made and more value comes from controlling systems, rules, and trust, did Switzerland game the system? Or did it simply understand the system before everyone else did? Because if wealth no longer belongs to those who build the most but to those who quietly manage the flows, then Switzerland isn't an anomaly. It's a preview, and the vault door is still closed.